Alex. So just a very quick video on how to downgrade or roll back on a firmware version on a controller. So this is specifically focused towards the UDMs and the cloud keys. And the scenario here is that if you accidentally upgraded to the latest firmware version and there's a feature that's missing that you need from the previous version, essentially this video is to help you roll back to that version. There's tons of videos online showing how to do this on a device where this is focused on a controller. So just before we get started, I just want to quickly make some notes here on key considerations. So when you're starting this process, you are going to lose all of your settings. So as my setup is here right now, I've got some networks, wireless LANs, etc. set up. All of that will be lost if you do this. You can make a backup of all the settings ahead of time, but if that backup is on a newer firmware version, so for example, I'm on network 7.4.162 here, and my actual controller is on 3.1.15. If this firmware version is newer and I make a backup now, I effectively won't be able to restore that backup onto an older firmware version. It's not backwards compatible. So when you get started with this, you have to make a backup of your settings, and I mean a offline backup. So a couple of ways you can do this: either just take screenshots or make notes of whatever you've set up already, or alternatively, what you can do is you can make a backup of this, apply it onto another UDM, and keep that UDM as a reference point to compare and contrast on your new setup once the deployment's finished. So this process, it's going to take your unit offline. It's going to take about 20 minutes to do this. There is no easier way currently to do this that we're aware of. If you do have an easier way, please add that into the comments. We will happily update the content accordingly. So make a backup of it. You are going to need 20 minutes in order to do this. If this is a live environment, obviously make sure that your customers are aware that this is going to go down. You'll also need to readopt all of your devices. So for example, I have a whole bunch of devices adopted right now. I am going to need to readopt these after this is done. Theoretically speaking, we shouldn't need to physically reset these devices. We are going to reset them through SSH. You might need to also roll back the firmware version on these devices as well. In my testing, it hasn't been an issue, but you might have a different environment and it might not work correctly. So you can always roll back the firmware on these things as well. Another important note as well is that you will need to have someone on site to physically disconnect the WAN cable from the UDM or cloud key at a key interval. If you can't have someone on site, maybe try asking one of the general staff at the premises to do it for you. It's not complicated. They literally just need to disconnect the cable. Alternatively, you can, if you have a way to control the gateway and switch off the WAN connectivity for a moment, that'll work as well. And then one important note here is that you will need to have access to a PC on the same LAN as this UDM or cloud key. So if you're doing this remotely, you need to have someone physically connected with a cable to that device. And importantly, that device, that laptop or whatever you're using, needs to have an internet connection that is not reliant on this UDM. Because this UDM is going to restart and reset, so internet's not going to be available, which means you'll lose connectivity. So with that said, we can quickly get started and I'll show you what the process is. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make a backup of our SSH credentials. So this will allow us to SSH back into these devices later on. So these are the credentials that I have stored on mine, and I'm literally just going to go copy this across to a little note document here that I keep along the sides, and I'm going to take this password and back that up as well. So this will no longer be valid at the time you're seeing this video, so don't stress about the password. Okay, now I've made a backup of the credentials. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to need to enable SSH on this controller so that we can reach it locally. So I am currently connected remotely to this device. I'm going to physically also connect to this device now. And what I'm going to do here is in the console settings, I am going to go SSH. It will prompt me to say this isn't the intended use, just say agree. I'm going to give it a password. So this needs to be a strong password, 12 characters in length. Just go enable. And now I can open up either command prompt or terminal if you're using Mac. This is going to just be done through terminal. And what I need to do now is I need to SSH into the device, into the controller. My controller, my network address currently is 192.168.1.1, which is where I'm going to reach it. I'm going to switch off my LAN here to make sure that I'm not accidentally connecting to the wrong thing. And I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to go firstly SSH and then a space. I'm going to type in root as the username and go to 192.168.1.1. Mine might be slightly different to yours. Mine might give me an error to say this isn't trusted, etc. If that happens, I'm going to quickly skip past this portion of the video. It would help if I typed SSH correctly. Okay, so if you've changed this multiple times, this is the error message that you're going to see. I have a way to override this. You can also just Google this error message and you'll see an exact way to do this. And I'm essentially just pasting that in. As soon as you've SSH to this device, it will prompt you for the password. That password is the one you've just entered in the console. So we're going to go copy that and just paste it in here. Okay, the password will not display as normal. I'm now logged into the actual controller. I can go info or help and it will come up with the specifics of this device. If you want to see a list of all the commands that are available, help is available to you as well. Just make this slightly larger so we can see it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start the process to roll back the firmware. So to do the firmware change, I need to point it to a specific firmware version. So the command to do a firmware update or downgrade is ubnt/systtools space forward update, or firmware update, sorry, FW update, and then I need to add the address of this firmware. So Ubiquiti keeps a list of all their firmware online, and essentially I'm just pasting that HTML, sorry, not the HTML, the actual HTTPS page, the firmware download location in here, and I press enter. With that said, it's going to now start downloading the firmware. It should only take a couple of seconds. It's not a massive update. So the firmware that I'm going to is in this instance 3.0.18 and I am going from 3.1.15. So I'll give this a second to run through. Okay, so the firmware is now downloaded. You'll see it start the restart process. So if you were physically looking at the device, if you're physically next to it, you'll see the device now says updating, and it will start to reboot the device as well. This is going to take about 5 minutes. Again, this plays into the 20-minute downtime, so there's no way to fast forward on this. We're going to have to wait for that. So we'll wait until that starts. Okay, so the device is now disconnected. I can see it on the screen because it's next to me. I need to now disconnect the WAN cable. So essentially, as soon as that initial download is completed, you can go ahead and disconnect the WAN cable. So what we're trying to prevent here is for the UDM or the cloud key or whatever to start up and to go and fetch new firmware. So we want to effectively roll back to it. It's again going to take another couple of seconds here. In the interim, I can see that the device has gone offline. I am going to keep pinging it until I can see it comes back online. Okay, now it says broken pipe, which means the device is fully disconnected. So I'm going to start pinging it. it will still be on the same IP address as I had it before. Okay, devices just come back online. You can see that. So the reason I keep pinging this is to check, especially if you're doing this remotely, to check that the device is actually coming back online. While it's reachable now, it might still be in the startup process. So theoretically speaking, I can try to reach this device locally. I can go to 192.168.1.1. It's probably still going to take some time before it actually allows me to connect to this. So it looks like it's come back online. Perfect. So we're going to go advanced, proceed as normal. Okay, so this is an important step. So if I try to log back into this device right now, none of the credentials I use, none of the passwords I use are going to work. The next thing we need to do here is we actually need to go reset this device to factory defaults. So even though it's on the older firmware version right now, I still need to restore this to factory defaults as well. So I'm going to stop the ping and I'm going to SSH back into this device. Again, the correct way to SSH into this is just SSH space root and then the IP address. Mine, just because I've done this so many times, it's restricting me, so I'm using a different command for that. But essentially, that's the way you would get into it. And then the password will still be the same password as I've used before. That's the one we set in the console's interface. Okay, so I'm effectively back into this device. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reset this to factory defaults. And to do this, it's very simple, set dash default. It's now going to, again, restart this device, and it's factory restoring it. It's going to take another couple of minutes, approximately 5 minutes, and we're going to leave that to run. Okay, so we can see it's busy factory resetting still. I can see it's already reachable, so if I go refresh this, it should theoretically prompt me to restart the setup process within a few minutes. Important, at this step, please do not go and activate this device via your mobile application. Instead, this has to be done through the direct connection via IP. So we have to reach it via its defaults. Mine in this instance is just 192.168.1.1. It's now become available, so as soon as I go proceed again, it should take me through the setup process. So most people will have done this through the app, but we'll give this a second to boot, and it has to be done through the IP address directly. Okay, so we now have the ability to set up the UDM. So let's go do that offline. So important here, the WAN connection has to be disconnected at this point, or it will automatically go fetch the latest firmware, which we do not want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to other setup options. I'm going to go set up my console offline. Set up console offline again. I'll give this a name, agree to the terms of service, and go next. I need to give this a strong password, so this will again be 12 characters in length. I'm just taking a random password here, and it should now complete the setup of this controller. Okay, controller is now online, and the first thing we'll notice is that our firmware version is now the one that I wanted to get to, so 3.0.18. That's perfect, that's what I want to use. Main thing I'm going to do straight away is turn off the automatic update for Unify OS and applications. Apply that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the network interface as well. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to turn off auto updates here as well. So system, and then updates, and then I'm going to switch off this automatic update. Okay, so we should already have our connecting devices here. So previously I had a switch and AP connected to this, but you'll see it now says we have to reset this device to factory defaults. Like I said, all the devices will have to be reset to factory default. So To do this and to save us time, instead of having to run out and physically go reset every device, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to SSH into these devices, and I'm going to SSH specifically to this IP address. So this is the switch that I want to get into, and I want to factory reset that. Slightly different to how we've done it before, so we're going to go SSH, and we're going to go space, and then I need to use the SSH credentials that I copied off the controller before I started. So the username that I copied off was that one. I'm going to go @ again and then type in the IP address 192.168.1.42, and now it should prompt me for the password. At first it's going to ask me, do I want to fingerprint this? Yes. You actually have to type in yes, and then I have to paste that whole long password that I copied off the controller before I started. Okay, now I'm in this device, and again, I want to reset this to factory default, so I'm going to go set -default. And now it's factory resetting that. In this instance, it would be the USW24 Pro, so that switch. And I can now go and continue this process for all of my other devices as well. So I can do this for my access point. I can do it for everything else. So we'll do one more example of this. I'll terminate that session, and I'll go do the access points as well. So SSH. Again, I'm going to use the same username and password that I took from the previous one. And then the password again. 192.168.1.122 in this instance, because it's that one. So in this setup, because I've just done it to the switch first, obviously the access point's connected to that, so might need to give it a second. Okay, there we go. So it's now back online, so we can go again, yes, same thing as before, password, again, paste that in, again connected, and now we're connected to the actual access point, so UAP SHD in this instance, again, set -default. And now that device is reset to factory defaults as well. Okay, so while that's going, we can continue on. So now obviously this setup is pretty barren. There's nothing connected at this point. If I refresh this page, we'll see that USW24 has now become adoptable. I can go ahead and adopt that because it's back to factory default. If you already have settings set up on this, it will automatically be pushing that settings across. But all these settings we had before are effectively lost, and I now have to manually go re-enter those settings here. Importantly here, we are on a different network version, and we are still in a different interface version. So it hasn't updated to the latest version, which is exactly what we want. Another final step that we have to do here to make this reachable, because if I just go to unify.ui.com right now, I won't be able to find this device, or it might show up, but it's not going to allow me to manage this device. So at this point, I'm actually ready to go and connect this to the internet, so I can connect up the WAN again. You can, if you're doing this remotely, you can tell the person to do this, connect the WAN ports again. And I've just connected that, and we'll see that console's completely fallen off. So we need to make this reachable again. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back. We are going to, in the consoles page, enable remote management. So it is in console settings, remote access, and now you enter the regular username and password that you would use for this. So that must be your regular Ubiquiti account. So in this instance, I'll go link it. And now once that's done, this device should become reachable within a couple of seconds. I can confirm that the account, the primary account, has this as my correct email address, so that's fine. And if I go now to log into that Unify portal, okay, we can see it's back online and I can get to it. So that device, it's now effectively updated or downgraded to that firmware version, and we can use it from here. If you have any problems connecting up the accounts, the admin side of things, you might need to create a new admin account, and then in the console settings, go transfer ownership to that account. It doesn't generally happen, but it has happened to me once or twice in the past, so just something to be aware of. And that's pretty much it. That's the process to get it downgraded, and now effectively you would be responsible for setting up the controller again. So just be cautious of this. Enabling auto updates or accidentally updating the equipment can be a bit of a pain for all the prompts, but just be aware of that. Anyway, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate your time. Cheers.